Just ahead on American Black Journal, major developments in the story that's captured the country's attention. We're going to hear from Governor Rick Snyder and Flint Mayor Karen Weaver about the latest plans to help residents affected by the Flint water crisis. Plus, we'll get the details on a Detroit conference about race and opportunity in America. Stay right there. American Black Journal starts now.
At DTE Energy, we believe that we have a greater responsibility. We believe that being part of a community means being involved in the fabric of that community, investing time, effort, and resources in the communities we serve. DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of American Black Journal.
Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. The Flint water crisis continues to be one of the biggest news stories here in Michigan and across the country. And now the contamination of the water is drawing accusations of environmental racism. The head of the NAACP paid a visit to the city last week, and he too questioned whether race and poverty are playing a role in the lead poisoning of Flint's water. According to the U.S. Census, the city's population is 57% black, and more than 41% of its residents live below the poverty line. Governor Rick Snyder says there's no discrimination involved here, and last week he held a press conference outlining the next course of action in the water crisis.
I want to thank the mayor for her partnership and for hosting us here today at City Hall. This is about working together to address this issue. Last week in my State of the State, I gave history, I apologized, I talked about the background of all this. This is about continuing to take action though. Now is the time to act, to do things to help the people of Flint address the damage that's been done, both in the short term, the intermediate term, and the long term, and I'm committed to getting that done. And I appreciate the captain and all his efforts to go through the summary of a number of the facts that have taken place recently. Today, though, I'd also like to announce a series of other actions that are part of the process to get Flint on a more and more positive track each and every day. To begin with, I want to announce that we're going to increase both the executive office presence and the presence of the state of Michigan and the city of Flint in terms of physical presence. So we'll be opening an office here at the state office building headed by Rich Beard. Rich is with us today. Rich is a Flint native. So this place is near and dear to his heart. He's done tremendously good work previously in our administration, particularly in helping the city of Detroit. So he's going to be our point person here in Flint. Joining him will be a number of other people, including the Lieutenant Governor, spending a significant amount of time here. Again, I'll continue my presence here. Harvey Hollins has done good work for an extended period of time in this community, and that will continue. But you'll find many other departments bringing resources and people to bear on the ground here to do things to help the people of Flint. One of the activity centers for that will be the Flint Water Interagency Coordinating Council. I established that by executive order earlier. We're having our first meeting today. I will be present at that meeting. It's really a group of state officials with city officials, county officials, and outside experts. People including Mark Edwards, Dr. Mona Hana-Atisha, other experts. Lawrence Reynolds, I believe, is part of the team. So we've got a great group of experts. We're also inviting federal officials to participate. Again, this is like, let's bring all resources to the table so we can do this in a coordinated fashion. And that will be one of our primary instruments to move forward in terms of taking more action to help the citizens of Flint. In terms of other issues, one of the requests that we just announced yesterday that Nick Lyon will be speaking to, our Director of Health and Human Services, for making a request to the federal government to expand Medicaid to children under 21. Also look at how we can apply more lead abatement programs to help those children, and also looked at more community-based programs, medical home models on what we can do with children that may already have other forms of health care coverage. We're putting in a request to the Small Business Administration about how we can look at low-interest loans and things to help the business owners of Flint get through this difficult time and then hopefully have an opportunity to have their business grow and do better in the city of Flint. With respect to the Flint Water Task Force, a group I established back in October of last year, an independent group to give recommendations to look at the background and history of this whole event and talk about lessons learned. In a couple of other occasions, they had made recommendations. We followed up on those promptly. They gave me a letter last week. I'm responding to that letter in terms of yesterday or today, my response is going out, and I appreciate the recommendations. We'll be incorporating those, and Director Creagh will be talking about that in terms of how we're incorporating those recommendations to look at the question of water quality and water safety. We'll establish a separate group of independent experts to work with us on the question of how do we get the water turned back on at the tap so it can be safe and clear, and what testing should be involved in that process to get to that point. In addition, I want to thank the Michigan Council Foundations. They've provided some grant resources to help the city in terms of Mark Edwards. So there's a number of steps we're taking, but this is just the beginning. This is not the end of the process at all. So I'm pleased to say the Senate should be taking up the $28 million supplemental request for additional resources in Flint today and tomorrow in some fashion. The House passed it very quickly and with 106-0 as the vote last week. So progress is happening there, but this is the start of a longer-term process to make sure we are committed to Flint. So if you do not look at this press conference as the end of something, this is just, again, another stopping point to say more is getting done, we're going to keep doing more, and we're going to keep committed to the people of Flint. With that, let me turn it over to the mayor. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. I have just a few announcements that I want to make. First off is that Virginia Tech scientist Dr. Mark Edwards has been retained by the city of Flint to oversee all water testing done by the state and the federal government. He is fully independent. He will be reporting to me and is funded by private donations. Secondly, I have told the Governor Snyder that Flint residents should not have to pay for water they did not and are not using. Therefore, he has set aside $3 million in his supplemental budget request to legislators to address the issue. There's more work to be done once we have accurate numbers from the Flint Water Department, and we will revisit what is right for our citizens here in the city of Flint. I want everybody to know, I appreciate the federal government stepping up, but this does not replace the state stepping up and giving the funds for our residents to fix this issue. I'm going to have Mr. Creagh step up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm Keith Creagh. I'm the Director of the Department of Environmental Quality. So I'd like to just take a couple minutes today to tell you what the Department of Environmental Quality has been up to. First, we do work in lockstep with our federal partners. So there's a weekly conference call actually between the Director and the Interim Regional Administrator to make sure that we are on the same page. We're actually in the homes with EPA and HHS for that matter this past weekend, looking at water quality, water parameters, and making sure that that is right. Thirdly, the water treatment plant and their distribution system, they're doing weekly sampling for water quality parameters and lead. Next, we actually have a 5-point plan relative to water and water testing. As you know, we have residential testing that's occurring right now. There's 2,577 samples that have been sent in. They're not statistically valid, but we can say that things are trending better. 160 of those samples were above 15 parts per billion. So the vast majority, 93.7%, were below 15 parts per billion. 85% were below 5 parts per billion. So we'll continue the residential testing. That's one. Two is we're doing the food service testing. So we're going into all the food service establishments and working with our friends at the Michigan Department of Ag and Rural Development and making sure that the water in those establishments meet standards, production standards, food safety standards. We're also doing the schools as we've announced before, 13 schools. We've been through those. And so we can expedite that, we're working with our friends at the Department of Licensing and Regulation, and we're just replacing fixtures. Then we'll go back in and test those. 4 is we're working with our friends at Health and Human Services, making sure that we're paying attention to any of the elevated blood levels and then looking at water as a source. And so then as we move down that road, and then 5th is we're in the process of establishing sentinel sites across the city that are geographically represented. And we'll do that in consort with a new committee that was just stood up so that we get the experts in the room so there's agreement. No longer is there a difference of opinion between those that actually identified this problem and those that were denying the problem. So we are on the same page, and we'll make sure we're on the same page. And we'll make sure that an interagency group looks at that, because there is no excuse. Flint residents deserve safe, high-quality drinking water, and that's a long-term commitment. So once we establish sentinel sites, we'll figure out to see if the increased phosphate additions to the water is actually putting down that protective barrier, and we'll do it on data. And we'll make sure the data is accurate, vetted, and transparent. And I should say that any homeowner that's put in a sample can go to michigan.gov Flint Water and get the results immediately. Upon the results, there's no longer a lag in that, so you can go online and get your results. And then lastly, as I'm working with EPA, there is the commitment to make sure as the city transfers to KWA that we get it right. And that's a thorough review of the system to make sure this never happens again. We'll make sure the engineers, the healthcare professionals, and the water quality specialists all sign off and agree to the end result.
In the weeks to come, American Black Journal will continue to bring you updates and interviews on the Flint water crisis and its impact on residents. Coming up next, details on a Detroit conference about the state of the black race in America. But first, here's a look at some important moments in Detroit's black history.
I'm Ken Coleman with a look back at African American life in Detroit. This week in 2006, the Michigan Senate declared February 1st Jerome Bettis Day as the star football running back prepared to play in Super Bowl 40. In 1974, 24-year-old Joe Madison was appointed Detroit NAACP Executive Secretary. And in 1967, Jimmy Mack by Martha and the Vandellas was released. These are significant events this week in Detroit's Black history, taken from the book On This Day, African American Life in Detroit.
The Detroit Association of Black Organizations is holding its 37th annual State of the Race Conference over the February 5th weekend. DABO, as it's called, was founded in 1979 by the late labor and civil rights leader Horace Sheffield Jr. Today, more than 130 organizations are members. This year's conference theme is From Civil Rights to Civil Wrongs, Race and Opportunity in America. Among the featured guests are Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, Dr. Cornel West, Andrew Young, and Reverend Al Sharpton. The event is also a celebration of what would have been Sheffield's 100th birthday. Here to tell us more about the conference is DABO's Executive Director, Bishop Horace Sheffield III, along with a longtime supporter of the organization, Reverend William Reveley of Holy Hope Heritage Church. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, sir.
Let's start with the theme here, from civil rights to civil wrongs.
Sure.
Tell me what you mean by that.
Well, we're right back where we were, where the imposition of courts, the justice system is now responsible for the strangulation and for imposing really a different way of life on the American scene. Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896 to Brown versus Board of Education. We have right here in this county, Judge Deborah Thomas, who found a suppression file with almost 1 million names of African Americans and poor people from Wayne County who were not even invited to be on the jury.
Right.
We have Attorney Michael Fortner, who started through DABO, the Commission on Civil Rights and Social Justice, who's investigating things that are happening in the courts today. We have an emergency manager in the 36th District Court. So we've gone from civil rights to civil wrongs, where litigation in the courts now impose upon us what was once done by water hoses and white sheets.
Yeah, a lot of people frame it that way now. Your father was somebody who fought his entire life to have us in a better place by this point.
And the change it by the law.
Yeah.
As you know, the Southerners respected the law. Once the law changed, the social climate changed.
Sure.
So most of what was actually brought about was done through changing law. And I think my dad would be extremely proud that we've come to the place we have an African American president.
Sure.
But at the same time, look at what it has unleashed. We have all kinds of virulent currents
backlash,
that are you know in this country that really want to, I think, in many ways, exalt white men at the expense of even white women, and all the progress has been made by people who've died to make certain the American dream included all of us.
Yeah. Reverend, talk about the role that you see this conference playing in sort of bringing people together to not just come up with solutions, which obviously they need to do, but raise awareness of the sort of dire situation and the many different dimensions of the situation as Reverend Sheffield was talking about.
I think it gives us an opportunity to expose the broader community to inside information of what's going on. A lot of times they know what they hear on television or what they read in the newspapers, but there are other things that are happening that we need to know about that we just don't know about. When Reverend Sheffield mentions about how we progress with law, and now the laws are being torn down from the inside by the courts, and so they fight a whole different way. We're going to talk about all of those things to give people an opportunity to know what's happening and what we can do to fix it. Now, there are a lot of good ideas and things that we're going to hopefully toy with. And one of the greatest things that we're going to do is show people how we got to work together. And this conference is bringing together Cornel West and Michael Eric Dyson, and that's a great accomplishment in itself.
Right. I was going to talk about how those are two people who they've been at it a little bit over the president.
Both of them had a relationship with my dad.
Right.
And my dad was always about black unity and unity in the black community. So Dr. West first came to Detroit with me in my Volkswagen in 1979. And I drove Reverend Reverie, we went to New York, and I sat down with Professor West, and I said, now, if the two greatest minds of the 20th and 21st century cannot come together and be in one room and have a discussion of ideas, what hope is there for brothers who argue on the corner in the hood?
Great point. And the dispute between those two, I've always seen it as not so. I mean, it has gotten heated at times, but they're not really saying different things. I mean, I think they both would agree on an enormous number of points about the importance of this president.
You know, our argument is always over praxis.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get it done? Not whether we need to do something or where we really are, but how do we accomplish that? Which is my dad's visions for DABO, is that we do things on a consensual, reasonable, rational basis. We come together in one room,
Right.
And decide how we do it together.
Yeah. So what will attendees see between West and Dyson at this conference? Are they going to be on stage together talking?
Well, we're working that part of it out on Sunday for the dinner. But what's significant, number one, is Friday, my dad's papers are being released at the Charles Wright Museum. Lenny Williams, great food is absolutely free. National figures are coming. Then on Saturday, Dr. Dyson is releasing his book with us, The Black Presidency. And it will be released here. Nowhere else will you be able to get it but in Detroit, and get it signed at the Northwest Activity Center.
Yeah.
So I'm working on that. I've got a visual of the two of them together, which I'm hoping to be able to release and have them together at that dinner. Listen, one of the things that both of them recognize, and it's amazing to me, I've been in Helsinki, Finland, and people have come up and asked me, was I the son of Horace Sheffield Jr., is the work that my dad did to transform Apollo bricks into a cathedral, which is organize our community. And if we are truly in the position we say we're in, then it requires all of us to lay aside our differences.
Sure.
You know, and lock arms and hands and figure out how we do this together.
Yeah, Reverend.
That's so important, and I think that we are still reaching out to other organizations to become a part of DABO, and we celebrate Reverend Sheffield's father by continuing to do the things that he was about doing. And we're going to work harder and harder. And I, right now, Vice President of DABO, and commit myself to doing it and encouraging Reverend Sheffield to make this legacy go forth, because it's what we need at this time.
Yeah, yeah. When you look at the things that that this president has been able to achieve and the things that he hasn't, what's the disconnect? I mean, back in the 1960s, the focus was on the law. We needed the laws to change to recognize some level of equality. That happened in a number of different areas, but 50 years later,
well,
we have a black president. We're not.
The laws had not changed, the Voting Rights Act, for example,
right,
and all the things that we see happen, he wouldn't be president of the United States.
Absolutely.
I think that there is a disconnect with people thinking that one person, even a powerful person, president of the United States, can achieve the kind of topographical transformation that's necessary.
The social change.
The laws always reflect the attitudes of the people. Codification takes place after there's been, some social upheaval, some changing of social ideas. So the real work is for us to espouse why it's important for the American dream not to become a nightmare.
Yeah.
And I think it, in this era, is more along the lines of class, which is, we know Dr. King was working on when he died.
Right, right.
And we have so few people with most of the money and so few without, and we quibble over crumbs, whether a woman, black, or whoever should have more of that crumb.
Yeah.
We ought to throw the crumb back to who threw it to us and take the steak.
We need more.
Take
right?
the steak.
Right. This is also an important celebration of your what would have been your dad's 100th birthday. That means something to me because my grandfather, William Beckham Sr., worked really closely with your dad.
Well, this archive that my dad collected is so powerful. You can go over there and pull up your grandfather's name, and everything that was associated with my dad is there. My dad annotated, he archived it, he made notes, narratives, etc. But what's important and powerful is that rank and file people who learned how to organize black workers,
right,
against Henry Ford became the foundation of the civil rights movement. I mean, what we achieved in Detroit
grows out of that labor.
Right. I mean, A. Philip Randolph, my dad was vice president of the NAACP, under him, Negro American Labor Council, in the 40s.
Right.
So Detroit had the leadership that taught civil rights folks how to make things happen. Mm-hmm. And that's why this archive is so important, because the Ann Jones and the Elizabeth Jackson and the John Browns and the Bill Beckhams are there. And they transformed the pile of bricks into a cathedral because they knew how to organize.
Yeah. Do you worry about that spirit and knowledge of organizing now, especially with younger people? Do you see it?
Yes, worry about it, but we press forward because we know it has to be done. And what we need now is demonstration. We need to demonstrate these things so they work, not just talk about it, but show it, and I think that as we look toward the leadership today, it was in the church, but it's shifting, and I think the shift is necessary because the answer is not going to come from the church, but it's going to come from people being the church. We've got to do what the Lord taught and not say what the Lord said.
Yeah. Do you worry about that role that the church is playing in Detroit right now?
Well, I think the church has become
right?
self-consumed. It's that self-centeredness. People love Jesus, but can't stand anybody else. Right. We are the salt of the earth. The church has the ability to change the cultural fabric of this nation if we just get aside from self-survival. Yeah. Churches are trying to thrive and survive when we ought to be really trying to rid the road of thieves, not just pick up folks who've been victimized.
Yeah. How can ordinary people participate in the conference?
Most of the events are free. Yeah. They can dial 313-491-0003, 491-0003. The museum event, you ought to come. There's a great video. His archives will be available. Lenny Williams from Tower Power will sing. Free food. And then Saturday, Dyson will explicate and articulate and agitate so we can elevate
Right.
at the
will-
Northwest Activity Center.
And will Dr. West be speaking as well?
Dr. West is coming in on Saturday.
Okay.
And we're arranging things. You know, we had a great snowstorm out east.
Right, it's hard to get here.
And so we actually were doing some miscegenation, if I can use that word, of his schedule and everything else.
Right.
Secretary had one attitude. Dr. West imposed another, said, no, I'm going.
Yeah.
And we're working that out, trying to get him in on Saturday. And my hope and prayer, and I believe it's going to happen, is the two of them for the sake of the unity that my dad sought to create. By the way, my dad just didn't want that community for black people, but
everybody.
for all people.
For everybody. Yeah, that's right.
The American dream was his dream. And what he fought for was our inclusion in it.
Right. That's right.
Not the Trump.
Not the destruction of it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you both for being here.
Thank
and,
you, sir.
Let's hope we
And
get
I
that
wanna
image.
commend, Bill Beckham, because your grandfather was one of those pioneers.
Yes.
And when you look at the March on Washington, I mean, the March in Detroit, that's your
That's
grandfather.
my grandfather standing next to him. It is. All right.
I
Thank
know
you
the
guys for
history,
being. Yes, I know you do. You make sure that I know.
Yes. I'm going to bring you over to the museum.
That's right. I would love to see the archive. That's our program for today. Thank you for watching. You can get more information about our guests at AmericanBlackJournal.org. And as always, you can connect with us on Facebook and on Twitter. Plus, you can hear our program on WDET 1019 FM. We'll see you next time.
At DTE Energy, we believe that we have a greater responsibility. We believe that being part of a community means being involved in the fabric of that community, investing time, effort, and resources in the communities we serve. DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of American Black Journal.